I'm going to get into it, let in the next person. So, welcome to those. So we're here today to talk about critical controls and hopefully around, well, not hopefully, but what are some things we can do to give ourselves a better chance of success to get to the right ones or the true critical controls. A few of you have been on my webinars before or workshops as opposed to webinar. Just get rid of any distractions if you can. I'm going to go pretty hard within 40 minutes. I'll go ask lots of questions. Also, yeah, love to get people's insights and feedback. So if you're switched on, ready for that, then we can go forth. And I'll talk about how you can get a copy of the recording and everything at the end, so you don't need to worry too much about scribbling lots of notes. Okay, first question. So if a frontline worker came up to you and said, "What's a critical control?" What's your one-liner description? What's your response? That isn't something technical, theoretical, or something that just confuses them completely. So give ourselves sort of 20 seconds and just throw something in the chat. There's no right or wrong. Really keen to see what people think around this. Anything people add obviously helps me and also helps me too, because I'm always keen to learn and get other people's perspectives. Thank you, Kelly, for going first. A non-negotiable to keep you safe when completing a task. Yeah, that's not bad. What do some other people have? How do you how do you respond when someone says, "What's a critical control?" Or when the board says, "What's a critical control?" Ian, a control to prevent a fatality. Thanks, mate. Marion, controls for major hazards. Okay, so related to big ticket things. And that's what sort of, Ian, that's your flavor there as well. What else? Who else has got something? Surely everyone's got something there. Brian, a control is something that will prevent critical incidents such as fatalities, major consequences. Yes. Eddie, having a safeguard in place if energy is uncontrolled. Yeah. Some interesting terminologies there. Anyone else got something? I'll keep an eye on the chat. So look, here's an example of some wording that's in the International Council of Mining Metals framework, and I think I've got a copy. I had a copy of their next version draft. Looks not too bad. Um, so we can see here. Okay, so we can either have it as preventing or mitigating, and how do we? It's associated with something really important. So maybe a material unwanted event or something with a material consequence. And a helpful filter is if we took it away, is there a higher likelihood? Do we have more exposure? Or if it failed, is that? And has anyone got an example from their business or from industry that they've seen ticks the boxes generically on these requirements? What's someone got there? An example of a critical control. A trench box. Thanks, Eddie. Yep, we could probably do with some upgraded wording, but I follow, mate. Brian, isolation of electrical sources. Electrical sources, or potentially we could have any energy sources there. That's a pretty standard one, isn't it? And that's probably very familiar across for a lot of people. Okay, thank you. I'll keep an eye on the chat. So if you think about critical control management or identifying critical controls, is there a problem? If there is a problem, what does that look like? And what's the evidence of that? So, look, I do a lot of work in this space, and the amount of critical controls I come across that are not even a control of themselves, or businesses that are just have too many critical controls, or not enough critical controls, or the workforce doesn't know what the critical controls are. I'm sure a lot of you maybe resonate with those challenges, or maybe even have them, or see more than that. And so what my promise is today is I'll talk through some concepts, some ideas, and some practicalities that, if are deployed, give us a better chance of getting to what are the right critical controls for your business. Won't cover everything, obviously. There's a lot in this space, and in 40 minutes, can't cover everything. But I'll do my best to cover at least some key ideas. So I know a few of the line. For those that don't know me, almost 25 years now in health and safety. I'd say probably the 22 of that is in mining, And the last 3 years has been mining, but also other high hazard industries, so rail, some construction, some oil and gas, and currently utilities as well. And so I've been fortunate to do a lot of work across the last 7, 8 years in critical risk management, which and part of that or a subset of that is around critical controls. Uh, yeah, a few of you seen this one again. I'm going to move fast. The push-ups is because I do the recording. I'm working on my language and not letting an arm fall out when I'm thinking. And I'll talk about CCM, so critical control management, through this as opposed to, or CCM as opposed to the critical control. So I'll talk about those key ideas. We'll have time for Q&A. And at the end, I'll talk about what you can do to get some more information or some more assistance in there as well, because obviously, again, 40 minutes is pretty quick in this concept. And I'll talk about how you get a copy of the slides and aspects at the end as well. Okay, so before we hone in on critical controls, it's always helpful, well, at least for me anyway, to think about where does the identification of critical controls sit within this critical risk management framework, because it's not a one-to-one relationship. And some of you have probably seen the middle graphic here in the middle, which is the ICMM critical control flowchart or critical risk management flowchart. It's getting a bit of a birthday. And around the outside is if an organization was to implement that, these are some things we would expect would be in place. So some artifacts, some things that are produced, and some processes and activities that are done. And so if we're thinking about the identification of critical controls, we're only at this point here. Okay, so critical control identification doesn't equal a full end-to-end framework. We're assuming that, and a lot of assumptions have happened, we're assuming that the organization has done the work to identify what is the critical risks or what are the material unwanted events for that particular business. That in of itself, there's some rules and some requirements there, and I every now and then do a workshop on that. We assume that the bow ties have been done adequately. There's obviously some rules and some requirements around that, and I also do workshops and training on that. And we're assuming that's been done, and now we're up to this point of, or within the bow tie, working out from all of our controls, what are the critical controls. Okay, so useful. So let's go to the first idea here. And a pain point that I've seen before is people say, okay, here's my list of critical controls, and I'll look through them and I'll start to wonder, are they even controls of themselves? So imagine if this is your organization and here's some controls or some critical controls within your business. And maybe these do reflect what is currently there within your business. However, I won't say a problem. There is, if I'll be taking a purist view, there are some issues with these controls. Can anyone share in the chat what are you seeing? What could be an example of an issue here? It doesn't really matter the risk, but if this was, I went to your critical control list and here's an extract, what's that, 8, 9 from them? What are people seeing here could be an issue? Throw something in the chat because it's important for us to reflect upon. Mark, thank you. Most appear to be administrative. Okay, so we have, potentially some things if, lower order controls opposed to higher order controls. Leonie, support activities. Thanks, mate. Yes, we'll talk about that if that's a term that might be new to a few people. That's fine. What else have we got here in the chat? I've just got to move my mouse over here as well. Yeah, Brian, very broad, not specific. That's something we're going to unpack shortly. Kelly, management is unclear and broad. Yes. Sammy, they won't actually prevent the risks of... Yep. So Sammy's talking about more that transfer of energy. Brendan, not clear on how they interact with the energy source hazard. Leonie, some of verifications. Yes. Eddie, not responsible for the actual workers. That's interesting, mate. Might be not as clear for that one. Marion, not directly related to causation. Mark, controls not clear and concise. Yeah. So that's when I see the word management in the word in saying this is a critical control, that's starting to tell me that we've probably are a layer above. And in those scenarios, um, we might find these particular pain points. And some of these you might have within your business. I've seen them across the industry. There's a client I'm working with at the moment who also has these particular challenges. And we don't want this, do we? We know this is an unhelpful scenario. Where we would like to be is the opposite of that, where everyone's got clarity. Our process to verify was detailed and specific to the critical control. And our frontline workers, they're part of the ones that have the clarity as well. And they know what good looks like and what to do if it's not good. Which brings us back then to this idea. So first of all, there's some terminologies here which a few of you may have seen before, um, which has come out through the ICMM lens. So a true control, can be described as an act, so a human action. An object is something that's engineered and doesn't require a human to do something. So guarding is an example. A human action is let's say, 3 points of contact, and a system is a combination of an act and an object. So an example of a system could be to wear a seatbelt. So there's an action, I need to put the seatbelt on, and there's an object, which is this engineered thing that I need to use. And then also there's some other tests here, which a few of you have made reference to. Well, does it prevent an unwanted event, or does it help to minimize the damage or the consequence of the unwanted event? Specific, measurable, and auditable. So if we think back to that list we just had before, management plans and things like that, that's probably not specific, measurable, and auditable. And also the bottom one here, this is more my personal opinion and what we do within our business, is we don't have these orphan controls. So we don't say we do this, but there's no link to the management system. So it might be the safety management system, it might be the maintenance system. We always need to prove that this thing we say we do or have, what management system ensures it's in place and will always be in place. Okay, so this is around the grounds. Quick yes, no. Gut feel. Would your critical controls within your business, or you don't have any critical controls from what you've seen, would they pass this test? So let's do a quick dump in there. There's a lot of people on the line, so this isn't a hard question. So Sammy, not yet. Kathy, not at all. Brian, not yet. Okay. Who else? Kelly, most will, but not all. Ian, no. Eddie, no. Okay. Okay, some others. Craig, you're on the journey. Thank you. Leonie, no. A lot of orphan controls. Thank you. Thank you for using the terminology as well. Who else? Who are some other people on the line? I can't see the list, so I can't do a cross-reference of everyone there. Has anyone else got a bit of a yes, no? Okay. So already we can see, well, here's an opportunity, because there's no point even getting to the point of critical control selection if our controls of themselves don't even meet this, let's call it this entry level criteria. So that's a key takeaway. And let's say then that they do meet the criteria. Then there's another test, and this I've only really, I won't say attached to it. It's really only be something that's moved into the work that we do probably for the last 3 years. I knew of it, but never put the importance on it that I certainly do now. So even though the list of controls or potential critical controls might meet those definitions, so act, object, system, specific, measurable, and audible, all those things, when we come into this framework, it may not pass the test to come out as what I call it a true control. And I think it was Leonie mentioned before. So there's these idea of things that are support activities. So support activities, they are things that we do that maximize the health of a control, but of themselves are not a control. Can anyone throw in the chat what you think could be an example of a support activity? which we might have previously called a control. So I'll say that again. A support activity is something that we do or a strategy that we have that maximizes the health of a control or a true control, but of itself is not a control. So who wants to throw in the chat example of that? So Leonie pre-starts. Yep, thank you. Brendan's a permit. Brian, some risk assessments. Yes. Eddie, permit program. Kelly, journey management plan. Awesome. Yes. So things like maintenance, procedures, safety management systems, training, education, they're the things that we do to support it. But of themselves, we know if that was there, it doesn't mean that the release of energy is going to stop just because I have a management plan for being on a journey. Okay, and then on the right-hand side is the verification activities, or I think in the new world they're called monitoring activities. Now, it might be verification, doesn't matter. So they are the things we do that check on the health of a control, but of itself is not a control. So does anyone want to throw in a chat what could be an example of a verification activity? So I'll say it again. Verification activities, they're things that we do that check on the health of a control, but of themselves are not a control. Eddie, safety audits. For money, inspections. Yep, you both guys have nailed it. Kathy, time and field. Yep. The only pre-starts of this one, yeah. Could be one or the other one, mate. Yep. Mark Evans, task observations. Perfect. Brendan, gas monitoring. Yes. Um, so we're on the right lines here, yeah. So what's another idea here? Those things that potentially we used to call critical controls or controls. If we apply this filtering, it helps us understand what really is a control. Brendan, the gas monitoring one, that is interesting because also I like to understand what is the response. So let's say if it's monitoring with an automatic intervention, then potentially we can start to move it over to a control. But if it's monitoring that then just gives us some information and then someone's got to pick it up and do something with it at some point, then it might make its way to the verification side of things. Okay, so yes, we did some work. Geez, it was probably a year and a half ago now, with an organisation with their critical risks or major unwanted events. You don't need to read the detail here, but get the idea. So at first pass, this bow tie looks pretty good, doesn't it? We can see on the left-hand side, there's a number of different causes or threats represented by the blue box, and they've got some consequences. Yeah, consequences could be improved, but not too bad. What we did is simply applied those tests. So does it meet the definition of control? Act, object, system, specific, measurable, and auditable, related to the risk? Is it mapped into the management system? And also we applied the test of is it a control versus support activity or verification activity? And what do you think we found? Who wants to have a guess? So we took their bow ties. Here's an example. Applied these simple quality assurance frameworks. And what do people think we might have found as a result of that? Think there was a change? There was an increase, decrease, no change. What do you suspect? Leonie, controls, not controls? Yep. Anyone else? Sammy, fewer controls? Yeah, I think you guys are reading the tea leaves there. Uh, so visual representation was about 40%. So 40% reduction in of the stuff that they had there of what were really, I'll use the word true controls. So think about that. This was a major hazard, a multi-fatality risk, and 40% of the things they thought were really important and were doing something were not. So you can imagine there was a bit of emotion within the business, and to their credit, then they embarked on a journey to then improve and rationalize and things like that. So that's it. And I wonder then, always wonder this out loud, because obviously I always like to look at people's bow ties when we do work. What could this look like within your own organization? If your organization does have bow ties? Which leads me on to the the self-assessment rating. So this is one I'm going to see how many people on the line here. All right, I've got 22. Throw in the chat. Self-assessment, 1 to 10. If your organization applied these frameworks or doesn't apply these frameworks, where would you sit? Eddie, thank you. 7, Mark's a 5, Kathy a 3. All right, the only one. Sammy's a 3, Brian's a 6. Ian, 3 or 4. Okay, part marks, yes. Who else? Sonia, too new to the organisation to determine. That's fine. KT's a 4. Who else we got? Brennan 6. Okay, improving. Got Jai, Hendrik. How are you guys going? Eddie, Doug, Craig, Maury, Sish 6. Okay, thank you. Kelly's a 6. Doug's a 6. All right, so not too bad. We're not seeing any 8s or 9s, so I think the we can probably see there's an opportunity, isn't it? So self-reflection. You can see what we've talked about here. There's a framework before we even get to doing the selection process for critical controls. We probably need to have a think about applying the definitions and give ourselves a better chance of success from what we're going to choose from is a true critical control. And the idea that there was probably a 40% mismatch there within organisations. So some work ahead potentially. If this potentially is your organisation, that the learning and the takeaway here, we've got to make sure they meet the definition of control before we even move forwards into the next aspect. And we talked about some frameworks there. Okay, next one. And I think someone at the start here had this as a question or something they'd like to cover off. So how are the chosen few selected? So first, again, yes, no. If I went into your business right now, and then someone else that works for me came 2 years later and said, give me the process for identifying critical controls. Is there something within your business? Is there something that walks people through? Okay, do this, then this, then this, or this is the criteria of what equals a critical control versus what is not. So what have we got? Sammy's a yes, Kathy's a no, Mark's a yes. Okay, who else? Ian's a no. Craig's a yes. Thank you. Brendan, only QGN 35, which isn't bad, but still, at least it's a starting point. Brian's a no. Eddie, the process exists, but it's not clearly communicated to the front line. It's interesting. Do the front line need to know the process to identify? Maybe they don't, but they need to know what they are, what exits the process. We only know. Or is your business like this? And there is, I won't name names again, but there's some recent clients, and there's a current client as well, pretty big, high profile. And yeah, there's not really, it's essentially this. Someone pulled the rabbit out of the hat, someone did a copy and paste from somewhere else, and this is our list of critical controls. And again, pain points, which we might see, these might be relevant to your business. Too many, too few. Horse trading, arguments, all of these different things. And that's not what we want. What we want is there's a clear, repeatable process. It's endorsed, whether people agree or not, but they can agree that the process was applied. It's obviously easier then for those that are designing and building the system. And yeah, if your organization subscribes to less is more, which I'm probably going to cover off a little bit later as opposed to this one here. So so this is a question to everyone. What do you think are some factors, some criteria that helps you work out if this thing's critical compared to not critical? So if your organization already has something in place, then throw something in the chat, one thing that helps you determine what's critical. If it doesn't matter. What do you think might be there? So Craig's the risk level. Okay, so I'm going to assume by that, is it related to a big ticket item? Kathy, does it change the outcome if it's removed? Yeah, that's a pretty helpful criterion guide. What are some other things that helps us, separate out from all this stuff? What could be a critical control? What are some other things people have? What are some people seen? Leone uses flowchart. Yep. Kelly, it's solely administrative. That's interesting. Sammy, is it control the only barrier? Yes. Um, Maybe Kelly a little bit later. We can talk about that one. Anyone have anything else as a check question? SME input, okay, that's pretty useful, and that can be used multiple times throughout the process. SME, does the control effectively address multiple causes, impacts? Yes. Brendan, would a failure require withdrawal to safety? That's a very underground coal mining centric um, criteria there, Brendan, but also is absolutely critical for the world and the legislative framework you've got. Tsunami effectiveness in mitigating risk. Cool. All right. So we know left-hand side, we've already talked about, well, to be considered critical, it must meet all of our tests first about being a control. Then second, we've got some terminologies here on the right-hand side, and I think a lot of these match up with what people have shared in the chat. And I'll show some visual representations there. I think I've got some slides coming. I'll just flick through to that. So I think we've talked about the importance tests, and I think maybe a few people might have mentioned if you took it away, is there a higher likelihood that this might happen? So, for example, the green here could be, well, autonomous braking is classed as critical. If we took that out, then there's a higher chance that we might lead to this unwanted outcome or the loss of control of energy. Singularity. So I think Sammy might have mentioned this. So there may be some occasions where there's only one control there for that particular cause or for that particular consequence. And yes, it might be a lower order control, but if it's the only thing we have, and this thing could be a big deal for our business and result in a fairly material outcome, potentially that's some criteria that points to we should or could consider this as critical. Absence failure, I think someone might have talked about that. I think Brendan used a coal mining centric one, but if this thing failed, is there a higher likelihood that we might have this loss of control? And Sammy, you mentioned this too. If it's mentioned multiple times within a risk assessment, so in this case a bow tie, um, potentially it's more important because it helps across a number of pathways. Or there could be a control that's mentioned across a number of bow ties, across a number of hazards. So a good example there is things around emergency response. Generally, we'll find them as a control across just about every unwanted event that could result in a fatality or multiple fatalities. And that's an example where we just due to its frequency, we say, hey, that is a critical control. Okay. So a few people mentioned a flow chart. So I'll talk through an example of what we use. Now this is, I won't say it's leading edge, but this is evolved even to what we've been using because I have incorporated some of the thinking within the latest International Council of Mining Metals Critical Control Management Help Guide. Um, so on the left-hand side, we can see those things already that we've already talked about. Does it meet the definition of control? Is it support activity or verification activity? Then not a control, just don't even consider going forwards. We haven't talked about it. I don't have time to talk about it today. Another test we like to do is effectiveness. So we know all controls potentially have different levels of effectiveness, don't they? And that can be dependent on, well, is it an engineering thing? Is it an object? Is it a human action? It can depend on its prevalence within the business. So, for example, if I have one of my controls is fire suppression on mobile equipment, but I don't have it on all of the mobile equipment, I've only got it on some, then that also can point to a lower effectiveness. So when we work with our clients, we suggest develop some effectiveness criteria and develop a threshold. So, for example, we wouldn't want to consider controls that have 50% effectiveness. So, on potentially out of every one and two occasions it might fail or it might work, um, we probably wouldn't consider that as for selection for a critical control. Then this one here about prevent or mitigate an material unwanted event. So is it attached to something that's really important for the business or some low-hanging fruit? Um, and then we've got some other things here. And some of this terminology is similar for those who've been around a while. So would its absence of failure increase the likelihood? So we've talked about that. It's the absence failure test. And there's some sub-elements here. So some other criteria that can help with that. So we talked about, is it the only control there? Um, is it heavily relied upon and there's nothing else that can do that? So there's some redundancy aspects here and across multiple failure pathways. So that's what those wordings about, which we've talked about. So if yes, the control can be relied upon to consistently function and provide the required level of protection to meet its objectives. So that's probably a newer question, which I like. It does think also if we do some effectiveness testing here, it might also answer that already, but I think this is a nice tollgate question. And there's here some sub-elements there which you can read. I like those questions. And it'd be interesting to see if we can get a yes/no response as opposed to a percentage weighting or some subjectivity. And in the new framework, if you got to here and it's still yes, then you could go around these green boxes and end up over here. And I still call it eligible for selection. I don't say it just straight away is a critical control. And then there's some other tests here we are building in, and I like them. So the independence. So it's not dependent on any other thing for it to do its aspect. So is it dependent on other controls and the causes, failure modes, and or consequence that it's protecting against? So I can't think of an example, but sometimes we might have a control that's dependent on, I don't know, uninterrupted power supply or something like that. And if the power goes, then we lose that thing completely. But the hazard might be there regardless if the power's on or off. That's just one off the top of the head. And this one I really like. I'm sure some people can resonate with this. It's applying that, the human failure or the human error against it. Is it going to be effective even if someone makes an error? Unintentional. So let's assume it's not the intentional stuff, the unintentional. And really only starting to play with that now. So a quick yes, no around the grounds. If you applied this criteria, or is there something here that's helpful? Just give us a yes, no. I know a few people had some questions about what's a flowchart we can use as a framework. Excellent. So we can see some yeses here. Excellent. And particularly, I think I can see on this list from some people who've probably been using the traditional flowcharts and maybe have a traditional one. So hopefully there's some aspects here that maybe are newer as an idea. Seeing lots of yeses. Well, that's really good. I'm glad that's value add. So the caveat will be here. It's not a caveat. That's not the right word. What I suspect will happen is very few things will pass all of those tests. And so I don't think that's a bad thing. Or certainly that last question, if you start to talk about the human error and how that's applied, what does that conversation look like? If we say, well, look, there could be, then the conversation, well, how do we mitigate that or prevent that? So I think the right conversations in the right areas will be interesting in whether the organisation's ready to take on that load. Mark, we're also considering HRCW as per legislation. Mate, I've got a mental blank. Can you just break down what is HRCW or someone in that space? Okay. So yeah, another example, another anecdote. Work with an organisation. They had 300 critical controls. You can imagine. Thank you, Mark. High risk construction work. Okay, interesting. Thank you. 300 critical controls, way too much for any organisation to successfully manage. They were overwhelmed, but they also didn't have a framework and a process that they could deploy to work through that. And by simply just applying a framework, and like the one we used was the older style as opposed to the newer one here, we went from 300, I think it was down to like, I don't know, 150 or something like that, like 110. We didn't lose things. It was just a downgrade as opposed to losing the control. It was just what we classified it as. because I know if it's critical control, it comes with a lot of work that happens downstream with verifications and reporting and aspects like that. So essentially halved it, no introduction of risk, but a complete reduction in emotion. So here we go. Self-assessment rating 1 to 10. So I've talked about the impacts if we don't have clear criterion. And we gave an example of criterion. Where do we sit now in terms of your organization's ability to apply a framework? Give yourself a rating out of 1 to 10. Kathy, a 3. Thank you. Who else? Ian's a 4. Bryce, a 6. Eddie's a 5. Thank you. Sammy's a 4. Doug's 5. Who else? Got a few people, a few other people on there. Don't maybe call out some names. All right. How's we got Ian, Hendrik, Craig, Sisha, Brian, Kelly still designing. Yep. Marion, Sonia, Vimani. What do you guys have? Leonie, normally you're in there. Brennan, 6. All right. Jay, Stephen. It's a bit hard. Stephen, maybe if you're on the phone. Okay. Good. Thank you for those that shared. All right. So we get the picture. We know there's pain if we don't have an objective process. If we deploy a process, we can see how it helps. We saw there was a 50% reduction for an organization that did do it. So it's probably a pretty good idea to start to embark on this. And it'll be interesting. You're going to have to make the call on if you deploy that evolve framework, how far you go. I'm a purist. I'd say go all the way, but also I'm a realist and pragmatist that it's got to be based on where the organization is as well. So that's our key takeaway there. Applying the right criteria is essential. Okay, and then the last one, I think a simpler idea, but it's still one I see really go wrong, is right sizing. That. So, how many critical controls should you have for a critical risk? Anyone know? Anyone answer or provide an insight? What do people think? Laney, 1 or 2. Stephen, 4 to 5. Ian, 4 to 6. Eddie, feels necessary. Sammy, 1 to 3. Kathy, it depends on the risk, yes, and it also depends on something else. But certainly the nature of the risk is important. Craig depends on the activities. Yep. Brian, risk dependent. Yep. Anyone else have a stab here? Kelly, depends on the industry, size of company, location, etc. Yeah. Okay. So absolutely, completely agree. It depends. It depends. It depends. There is. I'll say all of this, and then I'll say something that I tell our clients anyway. So absolutely depends. So the example I like to give is what about if I'm a small fabrication workshop and I do metalworking for a major mining house, and one of my risks could be let's say cranes and lifting, failure of a lift. Um, but I've only got 4 people in the workshop, and I'm barely cutting even, breaking even financially, versus a large BHP pit that has 2,000 people on site, and it has, let's say, 50 cranes, mobile, fixed, gantry, all of that. So we can see there's a massive context difference between those organizations, but they potentially have the same risk and potentially the same consequence. Could be a single fatality or multiple fatality. But we know there's no point saying to a small fabrication workshop, well, you need to have 6 critical controls. Um, they'll be like, well, no chance. There's only one person that manages our risk program. That's just not going to work. And a few other people said, risk and context and things like that. So there's that. What I do say to people when I do a lot of my presentations and conference presentations, as I say, as a sort of rule, if I think a major organization which has resources and fairly large risks, maximum of 5 critical controls. And that's not based on any science, it's just based on some practicality. and where they start to say, well, I want more than that, my advice is, well, get the five in, get them right, get them effective, and do all of the work to get them in place, manage on an ongoing basis. And if you can do that well, then you can consider maybe more. And it's highly unlikely that they'll ever get to doing five well, certainly if they've got lots of risk. All right, so what do we do if we have too many critical controls? So for whatever reason, we did our selection process and we ended up with 15 critical controls for one risk. What are some things we could do? Because we know 15 is untenable, it's not happening. What are some levers we can pull to get us to a point where it's more manageable? Anyone have any ideas? Kelly, effectiveness testing, review hazard and incident reporting. Have you done my training, Kelly? That's good. Thank you. Uh, ah, there you go. Nice. Well, good to see you remembered it. Leona, use the flowcharts. Yep. So you go back to the flowchart and do again. What else? What are some other people could think about if we had too many critical controls? Anyone else have any ideas? Because this can be a scenario. If we apply the flowchart and okay, everything's critical now. What do we need to do? Kathy, is the risk defined well enough? Yeah, nice. Okay, so I'll talk about a few ideas here. So one, and Leonie said this, okay, go back to the flowchart and just rerun everything again. Um, does it tick all the boxes, or were there some there that were like, yeah, maybe it could work if we're on the fence about some things. Maybe it's an opportunity just to filter them out. Uh, One which is not part of this, this is part of the greater critical risk management framework. But what good looks like is every risk or every critical risk is contextualized to the business. So instead of just saying, I gave the example there, the crane failure. So the if I describe crane failure for the fabrication workshop in relation to exposure, numbers of crane, amount of energy involved, all of that, that's going to be significantly different. That hazard description or hazard context is going to be different to the BHP pit. So if all of our critical risks had a context statement, then potentially we could start to do some I'll use the term horse trading. So you can see here, for example, a snake bite versus a loss of control of a vehicle. So in most major organizations, vehicle collisions and loss of control of vehicles is a pretty big deal. So maybe I could keep my five critical controls for the vehicle collisions, but maybe for snake bites, I might say based on the context and the exposure, I might only have one critical control. And that way I've gained myself in the collective four critical controls that are spare. Yep. So looking at the context. Um, Even though we talked about being clear and critical controls needing to be pass a few tests, sometimes when we get to critical control assignment, if there's some things that are similar, potentially we can do some grouping. Um, and if you do grouping well, again, you don't lose quality or lose detail, but emergency response could be the same one there. So instead of me having a critical control for emergency response equipment, and then emergency response actions and things like that, maybe I could just group them all into an emergency response catch-all. And another one here, I don't know if anyone mentioned it, but likelihoods. So we know in our bow tie, if we have our causes over on the left-hand side, if we applied some likelihoods and we could look at our incident history, someone might have mentioned, or based on our own knowledge of industry, there will be some causes which are higher likelihood than others. And same with consequences. There will be some consequences that are higher likelihood than others. And using that type of review process, we could then potentially downgrade or say, okay, this 1 in 100 year type threat, I'm not going to class the critical control in this line as critical. I'm just going to leave it as a control. And also, if we downgrade some critical controls, it doesn't mean we don't do some checking. We could still do some ad hoc checking and build that into the system as well. Okay, another self-assessment. That's a small bit of content. I'm conscious of the time too. So, how is give yourself a 1 to 10 in terms of having some criteria or a process there that you can work through if you end up with too many critical controls, or to get you to a level that is right size for your organization and not end up with too many or potentially too few. Who's got some 1 to 10? Craig, 7. Hey, that's pretty good in relation to that. That's good. Doug's a 5. Okay. Mark's a 7. Eddie's a 9. We have 5. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. And I won't do the cross reference here because we get the picture, having a process. Vimani, thank you. Semi, thank you. Brian, thank you. Marion, 5. Thank you. Okay. Ian, 5. Thank you. All right. So I've been through a bit of content. What's your one thing? What's a key idea, a key learning, a key takeaway from all of the content? Because that's where the rubber hits the road, and that's hopefully where I can really add some value. Is what's a one thing? Give everyone 30 seconds. Just throw something in the chat here, and I'm going to ask some people on the line. So I've got lots of people here. Kelly, I like the flowchart. She said critical control is really critical control. Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Kathy, I like your updated flowchart. Kathy, good. Craig, you plucked a flow. Yes. Doug, limit the amount of critical controls. Awesome. Sammy agrees on flowcharts. Yes. Who doesn't love a flowchart? Brian, flowchart. Okay. Brendan, correct amount of controls. Thank you. Right. Who else we got? Vimani, Marin, Mark. You might have already said something. KT. Eddie, difference between a critical control and support activity. Yeah, that's really important, mate. Stephen, Hendrik, Doug, probably all you guys and girls have answered anyway. Good. All right, not going to do that one. Ian, simplify. Absolutely, mate. So many tier one mining houses are doing that right now. They just went too hard 10 years ago, and now they're looking to, I think the word is right size, and it's not my term, actually. I'll give credit to someone else. Okay, so we're here for a number of different reasons, and we all know we can do better on identifying critical controls. So we know assuring that our critical controls meet the definition. We went through that. That's step one. We know we need a robust selection process that's repeatable, builds in some good tests, and if we can add in some of the latest decision making, is really going to help us work out what is the true critical control that will pass all those tests. Marion, your controls, thank you, mate. And also, we just did the right sizing. Okay. So, again, people have been through this, how do you do it? How do you get there? You could do it the way that I've been doing it for the last 7 years and just try some stuff, learn some stuff, and move forwards. And I mentioned right at the start what you can do to get some more help in this space. So what we have, and I've only just done it. I've built out all of these learnings and rules and everything like that into a software platform that's AI powered that essentially applies all this stuff for us and takes all the guessing game and actually saves us a whole bunch of time. So happy to certainly for the people on this call, I'll talk about if you want to get access to that. I'm only doing it for 2 weeks. Talk about that, but it's not for everyone. So if you're comfortable with your process, you think you're all good, then don't worry about it. But for those that you'd be interested to see, well, how could you apply it in this world? How could you take, because we're doing it for one critical risk, how could you take a critical risk, just pump it through the process, and what does it come up with that's based on data, not based on subjectivity? So this is an example of an output. This is just an extract, and you can see here, it goes and looks at your legislation and codes of practice and all of that, and you can see here how we talked about support activities versus controls, critical controls. It builds in the control effectiveness scoring as well. Everything's editable and applies all these AI tests. So if that's something for you, then I'll ask everyone who's interested shortly, and you can just reply yes, and then I can make it all happen. What's in it for me? Look, you've been here a number of different times. It's all about saving lives at work. Actually throw in the chat if you're interested now, because I'll timestamp this at this time and I'll line it up. So what does the process look like? It's essentially, it's the form, because I collaborated with the MindGuard guys, they're an awesome bunch of guys. It's just the application form where they then set you up, and essentially you can take one material unwanted event and just take it through end to end to come out with everything all done. No worries, Kelly. Thank you for joining us. But I'll assume you might be interested as well. And really, kind of doing myself out of job. It probably what it used to take us for a client 20 hours to do, maybe 25 hours to do. It does in probably 10 minutes. Um, it's yeah, pretty cool. No worries, Brian. So yep, the benefits. I don't need to keep talking about it. You understand. You've probably seen the AI stuff is there. This is something that I'm enshrined with, and I believe in this one. And it's not publicly available and all that. No worries, Mark. Thank you. All right. So if you're interested, either just put in yes in there, or if you want to go straight to the form, you can do that. That's what that QR code now, and just go and get cracking. No worries, Jay. Thank you, mate. You can go and do that. But right now, we can take some questions in the chat. No worries. Thanks, Sammy. I've got time for a few questions. If someone's got a burning question right now, you can put it in the chat. I'll stay on the line after the formal end of this as well. Um, because, yeah, happy to chat around this. I don't have a hard stop in my next thing. So let me see how many people are still on, whether we just open up the lines. How do you use the AI tool and meet consultation requirements? Yes, I'll come back to that one. Absolutely, mate. That's a good one. Like to get a copy. Yep, Craig, we'll get a copy of the presentation. So anyone could, because of, this is why I asked everyone to rename themselves. If we've got you named, then via email, you'll get a link to where the presentation lives and where the recording will live. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so how does the AI work with respect to consultation? That was the question. I can't scroll backwards up. It's not working on my iPad. So essentially what it is it has human toll gate. So let's say if a bow tie session, a bow tie has four phases. One phase is drafting. Thanks, Doug. Thank you, mate. I will do a wrap up with 1 minute to go for those that are still on the line. Make sure we're not go over time. Um, yes, so let's say a bow tie, you got to do drafting. So front end loading, I call it. It'll front end load it, and then that'll be your first human toll gate where it says, here's the draft. What looks good, what is right. If you've uploaded your safety and health management system documentation, then it'll even do that aspect for you. And then everything you need, it's essentially a toll gate. Yes, I approve, move to the next phase. The next phase is then we'll go and do all the tests and support activity, monitoring activity, and all of that. Um, Ask again, do you approve everything? Is this right? Change everything. Then you hit approve. Then it's a bow tie that's ready for consultation. Because as we've applied all the rule sets, that's when you then go and talk with the group, run it, and you can even through this platform run it live and change some stuff. And at the end of that consultation period, thanks, Doug, it will then print out an extract. It'll print out a sign-off form, and that those in the room go and sign, and that's how we can demonstrate the consultation. That can then gets uploaded, and as part of the final bow tie report, it will then give you everything, the scope, the context, the consultation, the sign-off, and the bow tie, and all of that. Hopefully that answered that. Okay, so I'm going to stay on the line and happy to keep answering questions that people might have. So yes, the slides and recording will get to people. If you said yes to the trial, which is about 11:52, I've got names of those people, so we'll get you the email to the form if you haven't already just taken the QR code, which you can get from the pack as well. And everyone knows where to find me. No worries, Ian. So for those that have to go, thank you for joining us. Thanks, Leonie. Thanks, Ian. For those that have another question or a comment, you can just stay on the line and we can unmute and we can just have a chat. Thanks, Vimani. Thank you for joining us. And for those that have jumped off that I haven't said goodbye to, so for those that are gone, if you're staying, then go for it. I'll have a look to see who's left. Maybe everyone's gone.